but last time we did one of these was over 2 years ago. I guess it's about time to make a new intro. And what are the kids into these days? Nope. Nah. You know, on second thought, maybe I'll go in a different direction with this. Eternal Edge Plus, as described by the developer, is a 3D action-adventure role-playing game following the young hero Cross on a quest to defeat the Lord of the Dead. Eternal Edge is currently in active development by Righteous Weasel Games. When you click on the developer's Steam page to see what they've developed in the past, however, it redirects to a page for CDOC LLC, their publisher. This could mean it's their first game ever on Steam, or perhaps they're a studio established within CDOC itself. Whatever the reason, their publisher has released a small stable of games including Slime CCG, which currently has a mostly negative rating on Steam. With my expectations suitably lowered, I dove into the world of Eternal Edge. Right from the get-go, it's clear that a lot of thought and attention went into the making of this game. The little note about a controller being the best option was a nice touch, and the title screen looked great. Ready to play? With my Xbox 360 controller in hand, I pressed start and then hit A to begin. I hit A to begin. I hit B to begin? Don't even get me started. Shortly after hitting the B button, the music was cut short as the world blipped into existence. As always, I took off in the opposite direction to try to break the world or find some well-hidden secrets. As a disclaimer, the build of the game I played was in version 0.0.14.2, so most of what I'll say next may change if you're watching this a year after this video's release. I was happy to discover that I could jump out the back window and run away from the door that I was supposed to walk through to begin the story. I immediately regretted this decision as I spent 5 minutes trying to escape a rock trap that looked like it would force me to restart the game altogether. Luckily, I was liberated and went back inside to really begin the story. You play as a warrior named Cross, and the lady laying with her eyes wide open on the table is your wife Evelyn and Cross. If you can't tell, she sleeps. Cross is quickly tasked with destroying the 3 cursed orbs to break the spell placed on his wife. With that, they gave you a key to open a chest, and that looked familiar. Yep, thought so. Wind Waker is one of my favorite games of all time, so this was a happy moment for me, and it provided hope for what lay beyond those doors. The strongest point of Eternal Edge Plus has to be how ambitious the developers were in building their world. As the door swings open, the game reveals itself to be a semi-open world before setting you loose to explore. As I set out, I began fighting everything I could and found myself heartbroken as enemies gave me 1 experience point out of the 100 I needed to level up. It turns out, I was just fighting the wrong monsters. The ones the quest guy, I call him Jim, told me to fight instead gave 4 experience apiece, which was a lot nicer. After completing the initial quest for Jim, he rewards you with a power level, which is just a crap load of XP. Jim provided me with another quest that required me to go on a high tower to speak to someone named Jinx. Happily, I accepted the task and set down the road, only to meet a big-ass skeleton who immediately broke my shield. This encounter was not fun. Monsters kept joining the battle, which added even more chaos, and I barely did any damage to the big guy who was placed so close to the beginning of the game. This quickly turned into a game of cat and mouse until the creature got tired of me and disappeared from existence. Did I mention this game is in very early alpha yet? Moving on, I continued to find more and more features I was surprised to see implemented so early on in development. Day and night cycles were already in effect, the music was sweeping and well thought out, and they even had some open world events. These events are like Final Fantasy XIV's Fates or other MMO-style open-world battles where there is a minor objective to achieve and a small reward can be gained upon completion. The first one I stumbled into had me facing off against 4 mechanized enemies. The music blared in the background as I circled around my foes before resorting to flying into the air and slamming my sword back into the ground. This proved very effective to clear out the rabble so I could focus on the single bigger enemy and take him out. Speaking of which, the combat in Eternal Edge is really nothing to write home about. You have an attack button, a dodge button, a lock-on button, and a jump button. They all work well enough and do what you expect, but again, not super unique in any way. One piece of combat I did find interesting, which I'm not 100% on, is the ability to break enemy shields by whacking them a few times. Once broken, enemies display red exclamation marks above their head, meaning it's time to wail on them as much as you can. It's a nice little mechanic if intentional. After an event finishes up, you get some treasure boxes which will level you up and give you some new gear as well. The events were a nice little touch to really liven up the mood, and the music was very strong for the whole battle. Eternal Edge Plus really has a lot of ambition, but that also may prove its undoing. While almost everyone knows who Plato is, not many know of Protagoras. Protagoras was one of the most well-known sophists who practiced sophism. Sophism is often scrutinized for many things, and Plato was one of its biggest opponents. One of Plato's major arguments against them, described at a very basic level, is that sophists are so focused on being fairly good at a lot of subjects that they fail to become extraordinary at just a few. Essentially, they dabble in a lot of things and become a master of none. I'm not a philosopher or a game designer myself, but I have played video games for over 2 decades. Like lots of other players out there, I can tell when I've played a game that will stand the test of time, or when I've played one that tried to add too many features would cause the game to just feel off. Eternal Edge Plus is currently guilty of the latter. The build I played was trying to smash in as much as it could, but didn't push enough on any one mechanic to be its standout feature. Let's quickly list every feature I found while playing Eternal Edge Plus for just 3 hours. It already has a day-night cycle, music that changes depending on the enemy type that you're fighting, combat that uses a targeting system similar to Zelda, swimming, a decently sized open-world map, open-world events, a quest system, a leveling system, an armor system that displays armor on the character, durability for weapons and armor, different attack animations and patterns for each and every one of their enemies, what looks like crafting later on, a small-scale story, breeze blowing through the trees, and so much more. This is a 0.0 alpha, and even with all that added in, I wasn't having fun. You can toss every single possible option or mechanic into a game, but when not one piece is particularly fun or fully fleshed out, it's like throwing a bunch of logs into a fire that hasn't even begun to kindle. Not to mention the studio is already handing keys out to influencers while the game is yet to find its own voice. With no embargo whatsoever being enforced, they're hoping to build a buzz when there's currently nothing to buzz about. One mechanic that could have easily been focused on is combat. 3D action RPG combat should be a fun affair. Eternal Edge stumbles with this as you start off with a very limited set of options that don't seem to go anywhere. You can swing your sword 3 times, dodge here and there, and block. However, your shield breaks after taking 3 solid hits. That's not fun. Your sword only has a basic 1-2-3 combo and doesn't feel like you're really making any impact. Also, no fun. My personal grievance, though, is still getting hit by a forward-facing attack when dodging to the back of a monster. These shortcomings limit your options to either stockpiling shields so you can at least block and counter, or doing what I did and give up on shields entirely, smack them 3 times, run away, smack them again, rinse and repeat. It's so easy to criticize a game, but I see plenty of ways the combat system could be refined and polished further. For instance, why not scrap the leveling altogether and go full Zelda to instead force the player to use their skill to take down enemies? Diving even deeper into that Zelda formula without risking copyright infringement, adding a few moves that can only be executed by holding down certain buttons or during a dodge can expand the options open to players. Another area to focus on would be improving hitboxes for the models so when you successfully dodge behind an enemy, their attacks won't still punish you. There's a lot that can be refined just for combat and Eternal Edge, but that won't happen if the developer is focused on adding as many features as possible, especially in any developer with a finite revenue. Yes, this is an extremely early alpha build, and yeah, I went a bit hard on it. What kills me though is I can see the love they're trying to put into the game. While they're trying to appeal to a larger audience by adding zillions of features, perhaps they've forgotten that the most important thing for any game is to first, make it fun. All in all, Eternal Edge Plus is a promising title, but the ambition the studio has may prove to be a double-edged sword. I'm really hoping the developers take a hard look at the state of their game currently and push themselves to make at least one feature really stand out from the rest. If they don't, their game will be lost in the flood of indie games that have already made this realization and focused on making a fun game around one mechanic rather than trying to make a mediocre game that just barely checks all the boxes. A big thank you to Gabriel Skaggs, Michael Slater, Sort My Games, and all awesome patrons for your support.